Welcome back, ladies and gents. Mrs. Cardwell here, and today we're going to be working on our Math Unit 1, Session 2.3. Today's date is 9/24/2020, and we want to talk today about which product is greater. Which product is greater? So I want to give you a moment or two to go ahead and write down and solve these particular problems. I want you to notice if there is a pattern in what it is you are working on. So we'll give you a few moments to solve. All right, if you need a little extra time, just go ahead and pause the video and take as much time as you need. All right, now typically when we're in the classroom setting, I usually ask my students to share how they solved each problem and what they noticed about the answers. So I want you to think about how you solved the problem and what you noticed about the answers. Okay? So, and in the past, sometimes students would say to me something like this. For the 6 times 4 equals 24, and 6 times 40 is 10 times more than 6 times 4. So 6 times 40 is 240. Okay. Sometimes students will say something like this. Oh, I just added a 0 each time. And then sometimes students will say something like this. I know that 40 is a tens number because the 4 is in the tens place. So the answer has to be a tens number also. The 24 moves over one place to the left, and then you need a 0 in the ones place. Okay? All right, so I want to talk to you guys today about this idea of adding a 0. Now, when people look at equations like these, I've often heard them say that there's a pattern here, and that the pattern is to just add a 0. But what actually happens if I take 6 times 4, which is 24, and just add a 0? What's 24 plus 0? It's 24, right? It doesn't change. So how does the product or the answer of 6 times 4 change when we change one of the factors to a number that ends in 0? I want you to think about that for a moment. We don't just add zeros. What is it that happens when we move from 6 times 4 to 6 times 40? So I want to know what you mean when you say to just add a 0, and why does it work? Why is it that in these problems, you can add the first digits of the numbers and then just add zeros to get the answer? Now let's look at 6 times 400. Now I want for you to work to find a way to explain why you can solve it by first thinking about 6 times 4. Why is 6 times 4 a starter problem before we go to 6 times 400? You can use a picture, a diagram, or a story context to help with your explanation. And some of you might also show something with the numbers themselves that helps you explain what's happening. If you have time, you can think about the rest of the numbers too. So go ahead and take a moment. If you need some additional time, you can go ahead and pause your video to take as much time as you need. All right. So now we're looking at this one right here, right? 6 times 400. And if we have a starter problem, 6 times 4, how do we get to that 6 times 400? So we know that when a factor is the multiple of 100, such as 6 times 400, will it always work to think of the solution from 6 times 4 and then put 2 zeros at the end? Who thinks they can explain whether this method will always work and why? What do you think? Can we start with 6 times 4 and then any number that's the multiple of 100? Will that still work? 6 times 4 is our starter problem. Will that always work? Okay, I want you guys to think about that when you understand what these adding zeros, this idea of adding zeros or place values, when it works, you can use this as a shortcut for solving a number of different multiplication problems. Okay, however, if you are not understanding why it works, then it can often happen, or it can often make things a little bit more difficult. So just make sure that you are recognizing that when you have your answers, you are multiplying 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 4 is 240. We're not just adding 24 plus 0, right? We're adding a whole place value. And you can see that we have a 0 in the ones place. And so we add a 0, or we bring a 0 over to the ones place, and it becomes 240. Now, in this next problem, 6 times 400, we have a 0 in the ones place, we have a 0 in the tens place, and we have a 4 in the hundreds place. So when we go ahead to multiply, 6 times 4 is 24. We're not just adding zeros, we're adding a tens place, and we're adding a ones place. So we need to bring those over and bump that 24 over. All right, ladies and gents, we're going to go ahead and be practicing a little bit of our multiplication skills in a game called Multiplication Compare. Now, this is a game that you can find in your Schoology math folder. Okay, I'm not going to take the time right now to show you exactly where that is, but it will be in your math folder so you can find it there. And we're going to go ahead and play just a little bit of a different version of that game, not using our computer. Okay? All right. So first what we're going to go ahead and do is I have a deck of cards. Just going to use these small white cards. They look a little different than the ones in our other sheet. Okay. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be writing down your problem and then your partner's problem. You're actually playing against the computer. Okay, so you won't actually have a partner, although I might try to put you guys in breakout groups to see if that's something that you can work on together. Okay, so in our game, the computer automatically assigns you some numbers. Okay, so it's going to put up yours. So 4 times 80 is yours, or is going to be, are going to be your cards. And then we have my partner has drawn 700 times 100. Okay. Now, just by looking at this, ladies and gents, you can kind of estimate how big each number is going to be. And you're going to compare, is the product of my multiplication problem greater than or less than my partner's? As we can see right here, our partner's is clearly going to be greater. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is put in an alligator mouth. Remember, opening toward the greater. Remember, you might have thought about or heard about it before in the lower grades that the alligator is going to eat the larger number. Okay, so this one's greater. If we had it on the other side, then I would go ahead and flip that, right? So instead of the open mouth pointing this direction, it will be going this direction. Okay? All right. So I'm going to give you guys that same information and send you onto the computer to be playing your math multiplication compare, and you're going to notice that there are several pieces. So there are several times you're going to be doing this. And just using the estimates, you don't need to solve it for the actual answer. You can just look at the estimate and see if you can decide which one is greater than and which is less than. So you're going to be doing several rounds on the computer game. Okay. Just going to scoot this up slightly. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do 5 rounds. And you're going to write each one in, both you and your partner's problem, and determine which is greater than. Okay, so I want you guys to be thinking about a few things when you are playing this game. So of course you're trying to think about, put your task. You're going to be playing the game. And you want to be thinking about a few things. So which problem has the greater product? And a product is the answer of a multiplication problem. Okay. And I want you to think about, how do you know? Okay. And are there any other ways we could think about these two problems to decide which one is greater? Okay. So I want you guys to think about that as you're playing the game, and I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and do that. If you need more time, of course, you can go ahead and press pause on this video, and then we'll be moving right along. All right, once you have finished playing multiplication compare for 5 rounds, we're going to be moving on to making estimates. Okay, and we're just going to discuss really quickly. Okay, we have a discussion. All right, so now when you guys were playing multiplication compare, I noticed that some people did not find the exact solution to each problem in order to decide which product was greater. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the following problem. We have 30 multiplied by 70. Then I have my box where I'm going to show which one is greater, which one is lesser. And then I have 32 multiplied by 50. Okay. Now I want you to imagine that these were the two hands that you were playing in multiplication compare. Which one has the greater product? And how do you know? I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about it. If you need a little more time, just go ahead and pause your video. But some students might say, well, I thought about the 70 teams with 30 kids on them. And then I thought about this in terms of teams where there were 50 teams with 32 kids. Now I know that 70 teams is a lot more than 50. And the 2 extra kids on the 50 teams, will only add up to 100 more. So you're kind of thinking about this in terms of a story problem. Some students may look at it a little differently. They may say, well, I drew an array. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to draw out an array to illustrate how this student was thinking about the problem. Remember, all of our brains often look at problems a little differently. Okay, so if this person drew out an array, and so we know that we're going to be multiplying 30 by 70, right? 30 multiplied by 70. 70 is kind of a big number, so I'm going to go ahead and break up 20 plus 50. Remember, 20 plus 50 equals 70, so I'm not changing the number. I'm just breaking it into 2 pieces. Okay? So now I know I multiply across when I work with arrays. So I have 30 times 20. I'm going to put it sideways. 30 times 20. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and think about this. Now 3, I'm going to cover up my zeros. 3 times 2 equals 6. And notice I have these 2 place value spaces. I have 2 ones. Okay, so if I have 2 ones value places, I need to include those on the end over here. Okay, so remember, I'm not just adding zeros, I'm multiplying, or I'm adding those place value holders. Okay, so I have that as 600. Okay, now I need to go ahead and continue with the rest of my problem. Remember, it was 30 times 70. I took care of the 20, now I need to finish. 30 times 50 is over here. Okay, if I were to cover these guys up, we have the 30 times 50. Okay, so that's this piece here. Now I know I want to compare it to that 32 times 50. Okay, so I know 30 is over here, but 32 is a little bit bigger, right? So I'm going to add on a little flap here, like a box flap. So this would be my 2 times 50. So I know that part's a little bit bigger, right? The 2. 2 times 50. And then if this is 30 over here, I need to have that 2 extra, right? Because it's 32 times 50. Okay? 32 times 50. All right. So there might be different ways that you can kind of think about this, ladies and gents. Okay? So maybe thinking about in terms of teams, or if you wanted to draw out an array to share that as well. All right, ladies and gents, I'm going to see you guys in class. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow.